everybody, I'm going to reintroduce her. This is the great Jesmyn Ward, one of the most celebrated and lauded writers currently writing in these American states. She is the author of several books of fiction and nonfiction, the two-time winner of the National Book Award for Fiction. She's a MacArthur Grant recipient. She's one of the most respected writers, and I include myself very strongly in that respect. The book that we're talking about today is called Sing, Unburied, Sing, and it is the third in a trilogy of books that Jesmyn has written about a fictional town, a very rural, very poor area on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, rich with stories, rich with complicated stories and extraordinary characters. She's taken us now in 3 novels through this land in a very deep and very intimate way. And Sing, Unburied, Sing is the most recent one. It's a novel about a young boy growing up in a world and in a country and in a family where nothing is simple and everything is dangerous. He is a young 13-year-old boy named Jojo who comes from a mixed-race family. His father is in prison at the notorious Parchman work prison in the Mississippi Delta and is about to get out of jail. His mother is struggling with drug addiction. His hero is his grandfather, but his grandfather is steadily being broken by life itself and by his beloved wife's dying of cancer. And Jojo is sort of single-handedly left to take care of his toddler sister, Kayla. His mother takes him on a road trip that is one of the most harrowing things I have ever read in my entire life, as he tries to basically keep himself and his toddler sister alive, with a mother who cannot take care of him and her friend who is also visiting her partner in prison, both of them using a lot of drugs. It's so scary to read of their, it's like the least joyful road trip in American road trip history, because it's the sense of these 2 children in great, great peril, not only from their parents, but from culture itself. And not only from culture itself, but from the undead. Jesmyn Ward, I could talk about this book all day. Fortunately, we get to. I just want to say thank you, and thank you for coming, and thank you for bringing us into your world. We started talking about this earlier, and the screens froze, and we had to start over again. And I'm going to recreate my question, because I want to get to the question that I really have for you. As I've been doing research about you and preparing for this interview, there's a question that comes up in every single interview that you have that people want to know, and it is, why do you live in Mississippi still? There's a kind of desperate urgency that all the interviewers have of like, but you went to Stanford, you got out of there, you went to school in Michigan, you have a degree from Yale, you could live anywhere in the entire world. Why do you live in DeLisle, Mississippi? And I saw that question so much that I started to think, there's something very strange about this question, because essentially what they're asking you is, why do you love your home and why do you love your family? We think you should love someplace else more than this. And it speaks to something that I also think, which is that I think to a certain kind of elite Northeasterner or coastal, sort of bi-coastal intellectual in America, the Deep South is as terrifying and exotic as any place in the world. It's more foreign to people than Europe or Asia is. They truly can't understand why a person would voluntarily choose to live in a very poor community in Mississippi. And that's where I wanted to begin my question, was how do you feel about that question coming at you all the time? And do you have the stomach to answer again, why do you love your home and your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's not it's not my favorite question to answer, because it's such a difficult question to answer. And I think it's such a difficult question to answer because I still struggle, I think, with my decision to return home every day. Because, I grew up here. I have a really large extended family. And by large extended family, I mean, I have once, at a family reunion years ago, we just counted like my mother's grandfather, like my maternal grandmother's family. That's it. And just in that one, like just in 1/4 of my family, just that branch, there was over 200 of us. So and they all, you know, like live on the Gulf Coast. Most of them live in DeLille. Some of them live in Pasquishan. So you know, like I grew up in a place where I knew everyone. I was related to everyone. Where, you know, my family had been living here for generations. Where I also grew up, I think, like my characters, where I spent a lot of time outside. I spent a lot of time out in the woods. I spent a lot of time around animals, um, and and I think that, especially like combined with my like love of words and love of poetry, I think that that meant that I felt like the landscape spoke to me, you know, and like I said this in our first, you know, thwarted attempt. Um, but you know, like there's something about this place and about this landscape that inspires me and that draws me back. Um, but you know, at the same time, like I can look at, it's something as practical as this. I can look at my state government's response to the coronavirus and can immediately, you know, like identify how it has been disastrous for my state, for my community, you know,
Yeah.
for my town, right? And can also like and then I'm also very aware of like, you know, the very real consequences, you know, of that kind of those kinds of policies, right?
Right.
And then when I look at like the history of this place, and can see, you know, like, you know, terrible policy after terrible policy after terrible policy, like piled on top of like the history of this place, um, you know, the history of, you know, slavery and Jim Crow and all of it, like
Yeah.
it just all it's hard, it's difficult to hold those two realities, you know, to hold those two realities at the same time and to be aware of those two realities at the same time. Um, but perhaps, I don't know, like the lure of community, the lure of living and working, and writing in this place, and also raising my children in this place where there's such a strong sense of family and such a strong sense of community. Like I think that that in part is what makes me stay. um I don't know if I'll always stay. Like sometimes I definitely feel the pull, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
to go elsewhere, um where things may be a little less hard and a little safer.
Right.
um but I haven't left yet, so.
Um, I've been deep in your books over the last few weeks. Of course, I read them all when they came out, but in the last few weeks in preparation for this, I read them all over again. And your writing is so vivid about Mississippi that there were times where I had to look up and blink to remind myself that I was in New Jersey. You know, I mean, to read the trilogy in order, of Where the Line Bleeds and Salvage the Bones and Sing Unburied Sing, the intensity of these stories, and the brutality and the beauty, side by side, the power of nature. I feel like your writing is connected to nature in ways that very few contemporary American writers can match, because most contemporary writers don't have to experience nature. And I say don't have to because what you understand is that the nature that you know is not like Disney nature. It's not like let's go for a nice walk on a bike trail. You know, as you say in Savage the Bones, you know, there's always a hurricane either coming or leaving from here. And I feel like that's such a great description of the world that you describe, because it's emotional hurricanes are coming and leaving as well. Cultural disaster hurricanes are coming and leaving. Nature is like the fight for survival is so vivid and bloody. Your books are, you know, there's rivers that run through them, and there's rivers of blood that run through them. And I was ashamed of myself as I was reading them to have this very un, unevolved thought at one point, which was, this is very masculine writing
Hmm.
because of all the violence and all the blood. And then I was like, Jesus, Liz, what makes you think that blood and violence belong to men? The women in these stories and in history have experienced so much blood and violence. So I wanted to ask you about that. About Sing Unburied Sing begins with the slaughter of a goat for this family, who is also a pet, who is also needed for survival for this family, and the child Jojo, who I think of as the narrator of the story, even though the story has several narrators. He's in my mind, the hero of the story, is a 13-year-old boy trying desperately to prove to his grandfather that he's man enough to watch this bloodletting without flinching. And he, at that point in the novel, is not man enough to be able to do that. And I wasn't sure that I was woman enough to be able to read it. I grew up with goats too, but I thought as I was reading it, Jesmyn Ward is somebody who knows what it really means to raise animals. And that's another thing that I feel like is missing from so much contemporary American literature, this lack of connection. You know where meat comes from. And I wanted to ask you why you chose to begin the book with such a violent scene. And in Salvage the Bones too, it begins with China, the pit bull giving birth in a very violent scene of birth. And you test us right away, almost in the same way that Pa is testing Jojo. Or maybe that's not how you see it, but you introduce us very radically to a very violent world. Discuss.
Um, I, as you said, I do know where meat comes from. Like one of the things that I, sort of said in answer to the first question is that, um, is that I grew up outside. And then it also, I think because I grew up in a in a place where I was like surrounded by my extended family in this larger community. Like my great grandfather was still alive when I was a child. He raised animals. Um, my when I was very young, my mom and my dad, when they were still together, they had animals. Various grandparents and great grandparents when I was little just would keep chickens and horses and goats and um, at one time my family we had geese. So I don't know. I think that
and pit bulls
yeah, and
and
people,
and fighting
right?
dogs. Yeah, yeah.
My dad fought pit bulls, and I mean, I was never like I grew up. I guess I hate to use it like you referred to like Disney, right? But I use a Disney phrase. But when I was growing up, like I knew about the circle of life. Like I knew about birth and death, and burial, and I mean that you know those were all things that I saw. I knew about like violence, like violence between two beings. Because as I said, my dad fought bulls, and so I would be there, for the fight, and so I'd see these dogs tearing into each other. So, um, so I grew up with it, I think, and I, I think that I don't think that I'm an anomaly. I think that most people, who are from the place that I'm from, and people, like a lot of people in rural America, I mean, they grow up with this. And so I don't know. I mean, I think, um, perhaps in the same way that, I don't know, I don't think that we have a sanitized uh, idea of, but maybe it's like it's very influenced by, I don't know, but like urban life or suburban life,
Yeah.
um, where it's a freak accident or just something that sort of comes out of nowhere and something that you don't expect. Whereas perhaps sort of growing up in a more rural place, like the way that I ended and grew up with it, it's it's an everyday sort of facet of life. And so I don't know, maybe that's what figures so strong in my work.
It's vivid. You know, nobody could. It's the most vivid writing. It's powerful. You have three narrators of Sing Unburied Sing, and for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking to Jesmyn Ward, the author of Sing Unburied Sing. First of all, writer to writer, I want to commend you for that because I've never been able to pull that off. And I know that you and I are both really big fans of As I Lay Dying, of Faulkner's that sort of ultimate book told from multiple point of views, including from the dead or the dying. But I cannot, as a writer, work out how to do that. And so I have craft questions for you about that. But the book is told from the point of view of Jojo, who's this 13-year-old boy who's a little bit of a lost child on the verge between childhood and manhood, taking care as best he can of his toddler sister. It's also told from the point of view of Leonie. Is it Leonie or Leonie?
I pronounce it with my southern accent, so it's Leonie. It's
Leonie.
very
Okay, I
slow
think I
and
think you
long.
100% get to decide how it's pronounced, Jesmyn Ward. So Leonie, his mother, who is lost to not only drug addiction but love addiction, whose obsession and fixation is on her partner who's just getting out of prison. And then the most incredible appearance comes in the novel of a ghost of a 12-year-old boy who died in Parchman Prison, the notorious work farm in the Mississippi Delta, where so many have died. And the story sort of moves between these three voices. First of all, how writer to writer, how do you do that? How do you do it? I've tried and I can't. I can't get it. I can't figure it out. So this is just me. Like I'm going to use you as a writing teacher right now. How do you sustain a novel where each one of those voices is equally powerful, and the novel belongs to the three of them? So, teach me.
I mean, because I challenged myself to do it. I just said when I set out to write Sing Unburied Sing, I was wondering, because one thing that I realized about myself earlier on in my career is that I felt more comfortable as a writer when I wrote from the first person perspective than the third person perspective. Because in the first person perspective, I feel less like I'm making the decisions and more like the actual person, the actual character, whose perspective I'm writing from is sitting here with me, telling me the story. And so when I set out to write Sing Unburied Sing, I thought, I wonder if, like in As I Lay Dying, if I could write a novel from multiple first person perspectives. And I knew that I wanted to write that novel from Jojo's perspective, to begin with Jojo, but then to alternate with his mom, with Leonie. But that was it in the beginning, and those are the only two perspectives in the first 12 drafts, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was easier, like writing the novel from multiple first person perspectives, because in the beginning, for a year and a half years, there were only two.
Right.
And so it was easier to sort of volley back and forth, right? And inhabit one person for one chapter, and then inhabit another person for another chapter. And I think that helped too, because I did it like chunks of in chapters, right? Versus, I don't know, moving back and forth in very short sections. And I didn't introduce Richie, like his point of view, until the final big draft that I was working through with my wonderful, amazing editor, Kathy Belden. And I wasn't even going to do it then. And she asked me, she said, have you ever thought about writing chapters from the perspective? And I think that I told her that I had at the very, very, like when in the rough draft, when I discovered the story contained a ghost, that a ghost existed in the story, I thought, it might be interesting to write some chapters from his perspective. But then I didn't, because I was afraid to do so. And so then she suggested, and I thought, well, if she if she asks, like if she's asking me that question, that must mean that she thinks that I can actually do it. And so then I went back in that draft and I just tried, and those were the hardest chapters to write because I had to invent an entire world, really, for him to inhabit. That was very different from the world, that the characters who are still living in it. But um, but it worked out in the end. But I was definitely afraid to try.
I want to make a Ghostbusters, I ain't afraid of no ghost joke right now, but I'm not going to because I have way too much respect for you. But it is cute that you were afraid of the ghost in that. As from a writerly perspective, I want to go back to something you said about writing from the first person perspective and feeling as though you've got a chair next to you, and the character who you're writing is narrating their life to you. I have this experience also. I had this experience with both of my recent novels, where, especially with The Signature of All Things, where um, I very much felt every day when I sat down to work that I was really taking dictation, and that and I felt Alma's presence so vividly. And I would ask her every day out loud,
Mm-hmm.
tell me what you want the people to know about you today.
Huh.
And I would write it down. And I didn't share that with a lot of people because it alarms them. um, but I, but then I read that Hilary Mantel, when she was writing her Thomas Cromwell novels and writing Wolf Hall, which I think is like the best book of the century, did the same. Literally had a chair next to her, and she has no hesitation whatsoever about saying that she was speaking to Thomas Cromwell's spirit. That's not something that frightens her in the least. She's quite comfortable saying that, and her two Booker prizes seem to indicate that she can say whatever she wants about that. So when you talk about listening to JoJo and Leonie and hearing their voices and hearing them speak, it's almost like a divination. It's almost like it's a very, for me, it's a very mystical experience. It's really like you're peering behind the veil. But to bring in a character who's an actual ghost
Mm-hmm.
just deepens that almost to another whole experience. And I've talked about this with our mutual friend and our speaking agent, Miriam Feuerle, where she said, but you have to understand, Jesmyn comes from a part of the country where people are a lot more comfortable with the idea of spirits and the dead. And I wondered if you wanted to speak about that, about what your personal relationship is with ghosts, and also how you understand intellectually or emotionally what it is that's talking to you when you feel like your character is sitting in the chair next to you and you're taking narration from them.
I mean, I definitely do think that that what Miriam said is true. Um, I grew up hearing stories like my great grandmother. One of my great grandmothers would tell me stories, or not just me, but like me and my brother and my sisters, but would tell us stories about how her husband died. So my great grandfather died, and then he came back to her, and he came back to her, and they had a whole conversation. And it was, like I was a kid when she was telling me the story, and um, so I didn't like question her experience of it. I just accepted it, right? I mean, she said that he came back and talked to her. Well, then I guess he came to talk to her, And so I I think that 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 that's a sort of common belief, that people, and a common experience, I feel like, that people often have here. Um, and not just that, I think that I've that there are a lot of people in my family who not it's who like who will, I don't know if they are, communicating with spirits, or they're just very in tune with their instinct. But you know like my mom will always tell this story about how when Hurricane Katrina hit, I mean Hurricane Camille hit, which was the last big horrible hurricane before Katrina that hit in 1960, and it killed hundreds of people, like on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. That her brother, that they were at her her aunt's house, and that during the storm, that all the boys in the family were asleep in one of the bedrooms in the house. And for some reason, my grandmother's sister, you know, like my mom's aunt, thought I should move. And so she went to the room and she made them, woke them up, and she made them get up, and she moved them out of the room. And right when after she moved them out of the room, the windows shattered
Oh my God.
in the room, right? And so like glass, you know, flew everywhere, and they could have been, you know, seriously hurt, right, if they were still in the room. And so every time my mom would tell us that story, you know, she would say, you know, that my aunt, her aunt name was, they called it, her name was Eunice, but they called it TT, right? Like she was like, Aunt T didn't know like why she moved them, but she just, something told her that she needed to move the room, you know. So that's the, I mean, there are more stories, you know, like in my family, that people have told me like that. And so maybe that's why it doesn't feel so strange to me when I'm sitting here, you know, trying to like access my creativity and exercise my creativity, and it feels like someone telling me that, you know, whatever story, I mean, you know, I know, like maybe it's a combination. Like I know that I am creating, right? I know that in a way, like I'm conjuring these people, but maybe, you know, maybe they're representative of, you know, of people who were already here, right? I mean, it's one of the reasons why I was drawn to like write a character, like to write Richie, right? Because I wanted to write about a child who went to Parchment Prison, suffered in Parchment Prison, ultimately died in Parchment Prison because, you know, because I discovered in my research that kids
Yeah.
like him existed. And so I don't know, like maybe that, you know, maybe they are, you know, maybe maybe I'm creating, but also, you know, hearing all at once.
I have no problem with any of that because I have the same experience, and I grew up in Connecticut. Just like the least mystical place in the entire world. You know, I think creativity itself, especially the way women have always done it, has a lot of that mysticism in it, and is open to that mystery. I always think about a line that Vladimir Nabokov said. Somebody asked him one time if his characters ever took on lives of their own or directed the story in ways that he didn't expect, and he scoffed in a very European white man way about it and said, "My characters do. My characters are too terrified of me
Oh,
to take lives of their own." He said, "My characters are galley slaves."
wow.
Which is, and I thought, woof, well, there's a different, like, that's one way to say it.
Wow.
You know, and there's something literally brutal about that. You know, this idea that this story will bend to my will, I will not bend to its.
Huh.
And to me, the dance of creativity is so much more interesting when you're willing to bend, and when you're willing to say, wow, I didn't know that's where, to one of your characters, I didn't know that's where you wanted this to go, you know. I'll go there with you to a certain extent. You know, I'm still you know, like that dance of navigation. I mean, don't think I didn't hear you when you said that you brought Richie into this story on the 12th draft. So if anybody is sitting there thinking that Jesmyn Ward writes so beautifully because ghosts are writing the words for her, let me just reiterate,
Oh,
12 drafts. So this
yeah.
is your labor, right? Like this is what I think of as, in this weird mystical experience of creativity, we bring our labor, like that's what we bring. And then the mystery brings this other piece. You know, so I've heard you speak about how, what an incredibly hard worker you are, and maybe that doesn't come out right because it makes it sound like you walk around talking about what an incredibly hard worker you are, but I want people to hear a little bit about what your writing process is. And because I think I get it from what I've heard you say, that the first draft is that sort of mystical, let it flow. And then there's a polishing that you do, draft after draft after
Mhm.
draft after draft.
Mhm.
So could you express that for everybody in case they were thinking that the ghosts and the spirits are just giving you this shit
I
wholesale?
wish. I wish it would be a lot easier.
Wouldn't it? It'd be nice
Yeah,
to just take dictation.
I know. And then the first time it's that down on paper, it's perfect. That would be
That'd be
excellent.
nice too.
That is not the case, or at least not my process. I mean, um, I when I write the rough draft, I write forward, right? So like I write from the first chapter to the last chapter. I'm not the kind of writer who can sort of jump around from chapter to chapter and piece together the story in that way. Um, so like I write from the first to the last chapter, and even sometimes while I'm writing the rough draft, I will. It's like I will sort of recognize when I'll recognize points for revision. Like I'll think, oh, I now I just discovered that I wanted this to be true of this character, or I want this event to have already happened by this point in the narrative. So I have a list of various points for revision, and I add to that list as I write the rough draft, but I don't go back and fix anything. I just write forward, right? um when I get to the end of the rough draft, I let it sit for a while. I let it breathe. Um, and then I feel like I'm freezing. Um, and then I go back and I read it, the rough draft. And I read with that list in hand, and then I add to that list. So I might make points about like character development or structure, or scenes or chapters that I want to rewrite or add to. And so when I come out of that reading of the rough draft, I'll have at least that's why I said 12. I'll have at least 12 different points for revision. And big, these are big things. This isn't, replace this metaphor on page 5. This is, completely rewrite this character, or, add this chapter. I mean, these are all big things. And so then I look at the list, I take number 1, I go back into the book and into the draft, and I just revise for number 1 throughout the whole draft. So that takes however long it takes. And then I get to the end of the book, I cross number 1 off the list, then I go to number 2.
Oof.
I go back and I revise just for number 2 in the whole draft, because I feel like if I attack all of the points all at once, or even like 2 or 3 of the points at once, I'm gonna miss something,
Yeah.
and I want to focus on each point that I have for revision. And so that's why, I have like 12, versions. Well, I do 12 revisions. That's before, I don't know, like only when I get through all of my points for revision do I then show it to my friends who are writers. Like I'll send it to them, I'll beg them to please read it for me and give their feedback.
I doubt
Um,
you have to beg at this
no,
point.
everybody's
It
so
might be the other way around. Can I beg to get a look at that when it's
yeah, so and then they give me feedback, and then I take in that feedback and figure out more points for revision, and then I do, and then I'll have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 more points that I have to hit that I'll get from my friends who are writers, and then I do all that, and only then do I send it along to my editor. Because I want to do everything that I can to the manuscripts before I send it to my editor. Like I want to get to the point where I feel like, okay, I've done, everything that I can do
right.
to this, and I can't do I can't do anything else without help, So then I
Yeah,
send it.
I have the same concentric circle. My editor's the last to see it.
Yeah.
I want to turn in a perfect manuscript and right down to hiring somebody to copy edit it. It's like, I don't want there to be any mistakes in there that don't have to be there, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I just want people to hear that because, you know, your prose has always been called lyrical, and and it is, which to me means that it reads like song. You know, even especially reflecting the title of this book, like there's a song line that runs through this entire book that is uninterrupted. You know, even when it moves from one character's perspective to another, the song remains the same, and that doesn't come easily. I just, you know, the amount of labor that goes into making something look effortless is not to be diminished. So I just wanted to go back to that 12 draft line that you threw in there, and I wanted to talk about Leonie. I want to talk about Jojo's mother. You do something very difficult in this book, and that is create a character who is the most demonized human that there is a bad mother.
Yeah.
And I would say that probably the most demonized, beyond that, the most demonized human is a bad Black mother. You know, that is like, in terms of how that person is seen by society. And my friend Ann Patchett wrote, in The Dutch House, in her recent novel, she created a mother who abandons her kids because she wanted to see whether she could pull off a novel with a woman doing the worst thing that a woman can do, which is to abandon her kids or neglect her kids. And she told me she had to walk away from writing that book so many times because she hated the mother. And she was trying to create this sympathetic character, but like, the bad mother is the one thing that a woman is not allowed to be.
Yeah.
And the deck is stacked against Leonie from the beginning because from our first entree into the novel, we see her from the eyes of her son, Jojo, who we already love. You know, he's a sensitive child. He's a brave child. He's loyal. He's a good brother. He's obviously just a stalwart, wonderful character, and a true, just a beautiful human being. And he's got this mother who cannot take care of him and will not take care of him and cannot take care of and will not take care of her toddler daughter. So when she shows up on the page, we already hate her. You know, and I wondered what that was like for you as a mother, to create that, and also what that was like for you as a Black author to create a character who epitomizes what the contempt, and the stereotypical hatred that so much of white America might have. So instead of sort of holding up the ideal of, you're looking into the, you know, you're giving us Leonie, who's a drug user, who doesn't feed her kids, who, you know, and I wondered what that felt like for you from so many facets to do that. And I also heard you say in an interview that initially you'd had her white and then you had changed her to Black. And she's in a mixed race relationship. And I thought, God, that must be so incredibly ethically complex, in addition to being creatively complex, to figure out how to do that, why to do that. And yeah, what was that like for you to go from Jojo's voice, the flow of his voice, into Leonie's world, and yeah, what did that do to your heart to do that, and to your mind?
Yeah. You know, she was a difficult character for me to, part of the reason that she was first white and then was Black was because I mean, the Sing Unburied Sing was difficult for me to write, period, right? And I actually wrote several unsuccessful first chapters, you know, because I told you I have to write from the beginning to the end. And so I wrote several unsuccessful chapters in the beginning of the writing process when I was working on the rough draft. And part of the reason that I think that those chapters kept failing was because I didn't really, I hadn't, I hadn't, I hadn't discovered really who Leonie was yet.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I just didn't know her yet, even in a superficial way, you know. And it wasn't until I discovered that she was Black, that they lived with her family, you know, that Pop and Ma'am really took care of the kids, that then I could move beyond the first chapter and into the second chapter and the third and the fourth and the fifth. Although I did have to pause, I want to say after the second chapter, like after the second chapter, which is the first chapter from Leonie's point of view, I had to just stop. And the reason that I had to stop was because as a mom, I was judging her. Like a part of me, like I was writing her, and hearing her tell me this story, and my voice kept popping up in my head. She would tell me something, it'd pop up in my head, and go, I cannot believe that she's doing that. Why is she doing that? Why is she treating her kids like this? Like, why is she treating these people, who love her and who she is supposed to love and care for? Like, why is she treating them like this? And so I kept judging her, and I thought, okay, so I have to stop, because this is going to show in the writing, because generally in the past, I've always loved all my characters, even when they make, bad decisions, and they can be sort of crappy people sometimes. Like I still feel an incredible amount of love for them. And I felt like, in the beginning when I was writing Leonie, I did not, I was judging her, and I didn't feel that same sense of love that I feel for characters. And I thought, this is not going to work. And so I started I realized that what to do was I had to figure out what was at the root and at the heart of her behavior. Like, why was she, what was what was motivating that, what was motivating her dysfunctional behavior, and so I thought, well, there has to be some sort of great pain at the heart of this behavior, and so I slowly began to sort of stumble my way toward understanding that she, that the biggest pain, that I could imagine that she would have endured was like losing someone close to her, right? Someone close to her dying. And I thought, well, she lost a sibling. And then I hesitated for a second, right? Because I thought, man, I don't want people to confuse me, because I lost my brother with this character. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe she shouldn't have a brother, but it was right. There was something about her having a brother and losing a brother that was right. And so I began writing, that the story of her brother, of Given. And then it was through sort of writing his story and writing into her sort of character and listening to her and witnessing her behavior that I realized that part of what is so sad to me about her as a character is that she feels that, that great pain that she feels is at the root of a lot of her, dysfunctional behavior. And the reason that she continues to act in those ways, even though she knows that it's that she's, that it's bad and that it's terrible and that it's hurting the people around her, is because in order to I don't know, grow beyond that experience or be a healthier person in spite of that experience, she would have to reckon with it. She would have to own it. She would have to feel it. And she can't.
Yeah.
She can't feel that grief. She can't process that grief. It's a character flaw that she has. She can't sit with it, So that's part of the reason I feel like she'll glance up against that grief and then she moves away from it, and she will lash out. She'll hurt somebody close to her. She will seek out Michael. She'll seek out, something that will help her to forget, right? Because she can't sit with it. And so because she can't sit with it, she can't engage with it, unfortunately, she just she can't be healthy, you know, like she can't figure out how to like thrive in spite of it. And that's heartbreaking to me, I think, about her.
It's unflinching. I want to read. I gotta reach behind me for. Uh, I've got a pile of your books here. I think I got it on the. That's the one. This nope. Yes, this is the one I'm looking for.
Okay.
This is Men We Reaped
Yeah.
by Jesmyn Ward. This is a memoir that she wrote about a terrible season of loss where she lost a number of young men in her life to addiction, to a drunk driving accident, to suicide, and in you write about yourself as a writer in this book, and there's a line that I was so moved by, and I wanted to say, well, let me read it. Let me find it. It's on page 71, if I recall. Okay, you say about writing about the kind of people who you know and writing about your family members. You said, I know that the boys in my first novel, which I was writing at that time, weren't as raw as they could be. They weren't real. I knew they were failing as characters because I wasn't pushing them to assume the reality that my real life boys, Demand among them, experienced every day. I loved them too much. As an author, I was a benevolent God. I protected them from death, from drug addiction, from needlessly harsh sentences in jail for doing stupid juvenile things like stealing four-wheel ATVs. All of the young Black men in my life, in my community, had been prey to these things in real lives, yet in the lives I imagined for them, I avoided the truth. I couldn't figure out how to love my characters less, how to look squarely at what was happening to the young Black people I knew in the South, and to write honestly about that, how to be an Old Testament God. It seems to me that with Sing Unburied Sing, you have figured out how to be an Old Testament God. because a lesser writer, and by lesser, I mean less brave, less honest, would have given Leonie a redemption at the end. And I want to talk about the end of the book now. So this is a warning to anybody who hasn't read it yet that I'm going to spoil the shit out of it because I really want to get to what happens at the end, because I think it's such an extraordinary piece of writing and mythical and epic. One of the most powerful scenes I've ever read in any novel is at the end of Sing Unburied Sing, where Mam's dying, and she has asked her wayward lost daughter Leonie to help her die. She's given her the assignment to do some powerful things to help kill her, really, to get her out of her misery and to get her safely out of this world. And there's a convergence of the living and the dead in that death scene that is so powerful and so devastating, and such extraordinary writing. Even just the placing people in the room at where they are so that you can see what's actually happening at this moment of death. There are two ghosts in the room with them fighting really for nothing less than the soul of this woman. And some people can see the ghost and others can't. It's so incredibly powerful. And she is the ghost Richie, who has been just this tragic character for the whole book, is trying to take her as his mother because he needs a mother. But what we understand that to mean is that he will take her to this middle world where souls cannot rest, because that's where he is doomed to be because of the violence and the tragedy of his death, and the loneliness of his death. He's going to take her there, and her dead son comes and is basically like, you're not taking her there. I'm going to make sure that she can go to a place where she can actually rest in peace. And there's this battle that happens, and Richie is banished, and Leonie is heroic. She's able to help her mother. She's able to do the task that she was given. A lesser writer, once again, I'll say, and by again, I mean a less brave writer, would have let that be the ending of the book and would have let everybody feel good and say, okay, Richie was finally disintegrated back into the ether, and let's hope that his soul rests in peace. This woman had a safe death. These ghosts are gone. I fully expected that the next thing that we were going to see in the book is that Leonie was going to come to her senses, right? Having then done the right thing, having inherited the spiritual mantle of her mother, who was a great healer, she would then say, oh my goodness, I've been such a bad mother. I've got to stop doing drugs. I'm going to get cleaned up. Like I would have done that as a novelist. So when I say a lesser writer, I'm including myself in that, because I wouldn't have had the fortitude to do what you then did, which was to add on chapters to let us know that it is not that simple, and that there are wounds that are still unhealed. And who's this coming around the bend? Oh, it's Richie. He's still the miserable undead. He's still lost in this netherworld. He still doesn't have peace. Oh, here's Leonie off to buy more drugs and leave her kids again with Michael. Like, and here's Jojo left to take care of his sister once more. And you had the fortitude to leave us with the understanding that there are wounds that cannot be healed. And I don't think that's a popular message, but I want to commend you for it, because I think it's a true message. And I also think it speaks to, I don't know why it makes me emotional to say this, but it speaks to your evolution as a novelist, just novelist to novelist. I just want to say, you're fully in your strength now, to be able to unflinchingly tell that story. And I wept through the last pages of that book as hard as I've ever wept through any book, and bowed down at the beauty of it. So thank you. Just it's so moving to me. And how did you do it? Once again, I feel like I'm such a cheater. I'm like acting like I'm offering my followers this great interview with you, but all I'm really doing is taking a masterclass in writing from you.
Oh no. I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't know if I can answer that question. That, the end, by the time I get to the end of one of my books, like by the time I get to like the last two chapters, it's almost as if like there's a real momentum. There's a real momentum to how quickly, and how truthfully, I don't know if that's the right word, the story is coming to me. It's always a struggle in the beginning, but I feel like, as I find my way and make my way deeper and deeper into the story, it just starts coming. And I know that's a totally dissatisfactory answer, but by the time that I got to the end, I mean, that is what came, like that is what those characters, like these voices, that's what they revealed to me. Like that was just right. I think, and part of the reason that I said that the thing that I said about, about Leonie being a heartbreaking character is because I think that I wanted her to have that redemption, that, and I wanted her to, to get to this place where where I mean, she's different at the end of the novel, but I don't think that she's different in the ways that lots of readers would want. I think, and I wanted, Richie to ascend, and to cross the water and to be in that place with all the other spirits where they were singing. But I think, that's not what happened. I mean, as I was writing it, like, Jojo walked out into the woods and then he found himself in front of that tree. And I was like, oh no, like
Oh
this is
no,
what
yeah.
this is what is going on. And then here were all the other ghosts. And then there was like that like
Oh, it's such a
torrent
scene.
of voices, just with all of them, like trying to communicate why they were stuck, and that's just what it was, and that's what those, it's very hard to answer that question. I feel like I can't, yeah, I mean, that's just where I was drawn, and where they, I don't know, I guess where they wanted to bring me. I don't know. I think that ultimately that a lot of it is just rooted in character, and like you know that, right? Like, the characters go, I disagree, with Nabokov, and I totally mispronounced his name. My character surprised me all the time, you know,
Mine
and
too.
they go where they want to go, and where they want to go is totally determined by who they are, you know, and by what they're experiencing and what they're sort of fighting with and what motivates them. And you know, in those moments at the end of the book, in those chapters, like that's where they wanted to go and that's what they wanted to show me, and that's where we went. So yeah, that's totally the satisfactory answer.
Oh,
But
I'm satisfied with it. I'm satisfied with it. And I'm thinking too that it's like, you know, you didn't override it by saying, wouldn't it be pretty if life was different than it is? You know, I have loved addicts,
mm-hmm,
and I know what it means. That it means that you can love an addict, but they cannot love you. You
mm-hmm,
know, they just can't. You know, and that's just the reality of them when they're in their addiction. They can love you when they're sober, but they can't love you when they're in their active addiction.
mm-hmm,
And that's, you know, that, you know, like you've seen that and you know that. And so there isn't some sort of effort to shine that up and make that look like that isn't so. And the souls who are trapped in the medium world, in the trees at the end of the novel, who all died violent and vicious
mm-hmm,
deaths that you don't spell out, but that we gather
mm-hmm.
are deaths of oppression and
Yeah.
racism and violence. You know, it would be pretty to look at America and say, yeah, that's not the story, but it is.
Mm-hmm,
And that's where I see you coming into your, you know, real power, as an unflinching reporter of what it really is, you know,
mm-hmm,
and I'm grateful for that, you know, as a reader, that you'll do that for us, and that leads me to a question that I want to turn to, as we're coming to the end of this conversation, which is about what you think of as your role, or the role of author slash artist slash activist educator. Um, you recently published this extraordinary book, which I urge everybody to read too, The Fire This Time. I just could keep, you have all those books on your walls, but I just have this bottomless, I've got like a vending machine back here, and all it does is spit out Jesmyn Ward books and novels. Um, The Fire This Time is a brilliant anthology, that I hope you all read, that Jesmyn created in response to Trayvon Martin's murder, and specifically in response to the acquittal of his murderer, and an overwhelming desire to have to speak to that. Um, is this a role you want to have, or is this a role you feel that you have to have?
it is I think it's a role that I feel a responsibility to have. And I think that part of the reason that I feel that sense of responsibility is because especially when I was growing up, like when I was a kid, you know, I was a reader before I was a writer. And when I was growing up, I it was very hard for me to find people like me and like the people that I grew up with, and like, you know, people like my family members in literature, you know. I definitely didn't see them in, you know, like on television or in film, you know, like in pop culture. And so, you know, I turned to books and I didn't see there. And I think, you know, that made me, I just felt erased, you know, like there's something about not seeing yourself that does make you feel erased and voiceless in a way. And so I don't know. And so when as I grew older and began discovering, you know, Alice Walker's work, Toni Morrison's work, you know, Gail Jones' work, Ntozake Shange's work, like here you know, I guess as my reading horizons broadened and I began discovering, you know, these writers who reflected, you know, who reflected me, you know, who reflected me, who reflected the kind of people that I grew up with, the kind of people, you know, who were like in my family. I began to feel seen, and I think that I really recognized the worth in that, you know, like the worthiness of that, of like, of, you know, of feeling like, you know, I don't know, like feeling like, you know, your stories and the people of and the stories of the people around you, like there, those stories can sing, those stories can be beautiful, they can be painful, but they can, you know, sort of lift you up and elevate you. And I don't know, that 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 seems like a, while I think at times that is a painful endeavor, you know, to create work like that, I think that it's worthwhile, you know, like I think that it's worthwhile, that I can sit with this, you know, I can do what Leonie couldn't, and I can sit with this, you know, with this pain, with this grief, with this, you know, joy, with this beauty. I can sit with it all, and I can translate it. You know, I can let it, I can let those stories like sing through me, and I can spin them out into the world, and hopefully they will help other people to feel seen. Hopefully they will help other people to feel elevated, and to, you know, to feel buoyed up, because, you know, this life is, it's hard. It can be very hard. And so, you know, like it feels like a responsibility, but it's a responsibility that that I that I embrace, and that I, you know, that I feel is worthwhile. Um, that was a roundabout answer to your to your question, but
I feel like that was a direct answer to my question. Um, and I thank you for it. And I thank you for your work and for giving us this time today. And I kind of want to take us out with my favorite character in all of your books, um, who may be one of my favorite female characters in all of literature, and that's China. Um,
uh,
China, China, for those of you who've read all of Jesmyn's book, China is the pit bull from Salvage the Bones, who is a new mother
mhm,
and also a fierce fighter. And we meet her at the beginning of this novel that is set as Katrina is bearing down on the Gulf, and she's delivering puppies in a what is literally a bloodbath. And there's a bloodbath later on where she's in a dogfight, despite the fact that she's a nursing mother. And you've spoken of her as being like Medea.
mhm,
And she is a sort of mythical, extraordinary character. But when there's somebody who objects to the fact that she not objects to dog fighting, but objects to the fact that a dog who's a nursing mother is being sent into a dog fight, and I think it's Skeeta who says, "To give life is to know what's worth fighting for. To give life is to know what's worth fighting for," and he knows that the fact that she now has puppies of her own is going to make her an even fiercer fighter.
mhm.
So. Um, I just want to say thank you for the fighting that you do in the world as well, as a writer, as a mother, and as a teacher, as an activist, as an educator. Um, there's a spirit of China in you, I know. And I mean, we're all of us who write, we are all of our characters, but I really loved that dog. And you know, and I was kind of hoping that she would show up again. And
Yeah,
she
yeah,
does kind of swim off, and it's like she's gonna come back. Maybe there'll be another Bois Sauvage novel,
yeah.
and maybe she'll come back. But that could also be my wouldn't it be pretty if the world were a certain way attitude.
I think I wanted the readers to be able to sort of to create, like to carry the story forth, and determine whether or not, you know, they thought she came
Yeah.
back. Um, so that's part of the reason that I wanted to leave it open, because I wanted people to be able to make up their own minds.
Look, I have the infinite amount of respect for you, Jesmyn Ward, but I just do want to tell you how to do your business. That in your next book, I do want China to come back and be JoJo's dog. Because that kid could really use a strong mother. So
And
just saying, I mean, that may Disneyfy your entire thing. But if you're taking comments,
I hadn't imagined that.
in my imagination, that's how it happens.
That's a good one.
Yeah, a little too on the nose, maybe, but I think you're a more powerful writer than that. So, everybody, thank you for joining us today, and Jesmyn, all the best and all love to you, and really, you know, I will read anything you ever write, ever, and I know that many other people will too, and I consider myself lucky to be working at the same time as you. So, thanks for honoring me with this conversation today.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll sign off. And you did great on your very first Instagram Live. Fabulous. Oh wait, there's one thing we have to do.
Okay.
Just smile. I have to take a screenshot so that I can
let-
get a good
let-
picture, right? Yeah, there, that's it. Big smile and yeah. Okay, got it. Everybody, and all the best to you, Jesmyn. Lots of love.
Bye.